Imagine waking up tomorrow to a world that's gone completely silent. No engines, no internet, just the wind. Now, fast forward 1,000 years. Your city is a forest, and your life is a mystery for someone else to solve. We like to think our world is permanent, but history is a graveyard of unbreakable empires. Today, we're reopening the coldest cases in human history. 10 civilizations that reached the peak of power, then walked into the shadows and never came back. What happens when a whole world simply stops? Let's find out. Let's start our journey in what is now Pakistan and northwest India. Around 4,500 years ago, while the builders of the Great Pyramid were still sweating under the Egyptian sun, a far more advanced miracle was unfolding here. This was the Indus Valley civilization. At its peak, it was home to over 5 million people. That's bigger than the entire population of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. But here's the kicker. For thousands of years, the world completely forgot they existed. It wasn't until the 1920s that archaeologists stumbled upon the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, and what they found changed everything we thought we knew about human history. When you walk through these ruins, even today, it doesn't feel like an ancient city. It feels like a modern suburb. They had a perfect grid system, straight streets, 90-degree corners, and a sophisticated drainage system that would put some modern cities to shame. Every house, no matter how small, had access to a private bathroom and a flushing toilet connected to a citywide brick sewer system. Think about that. They had plumbing 4,000 years before it became standard in London. But here is where it gets weird, and honestly, a bit eerie. In almost every other ancient civilization, we find massive monuments to power. We find towering temples to gods, golden palaces for kings, and huge murals celebrating bloody wars. In the Indus Valley, we find nothing. No palaces, no temples, no statues of great emperors. And incredibly, almost no weapons, no swords, no shields, no chariots of war. It seems they were a society built entirely on trade, craftsmanship, and, dare I say it, equality. Their great bath wasn't a palace, it was a public swimming pool. They spent their energy making standardized weights for trade and beautiful jewelry rather than building war machines. They were the world's first peaceful middle-class society. And then, around 1900 BCE, the silence began. Slowly, the writing, a script we still can't crack to this day, started to disappear. The standardized bricks became irregular. The once pristine drains clogged with silt. People didn't die off in a massive war, they just walked away. They abandoned their perfect cities and scattered into the countryside. For decades, we thought they were wiped out by invaders. But modern science tells a different, more chilling story. The Great Sarasvati River, the lifeblood of their world, began to dry up due to shifting tectonic plates. At the same time, the monsoon rains, the heart of their agriculture, failed. Imagine your entire economy, your food and your water source vanishing over a couple of generations. The Manhattan of the Bronze Age couldn't survive a changing climate. The Indus people didn't vanish into thin air, but their way of life did. They left behind a ghost grid of bricks, a silent warning that no matter how advanced your plumbing is, you are always at the mercy of the earth. While we're on the subject of ancient mysteries, we have to travel across the ocean to the Cahokia Valley in Peru. For a long time, historians believed that civilization in the Americas started much later than in the rest of the world. But in the 1990s, a discovery at a site called Caral turned everything we thought we knew upside down. Caral-Supe is nearly 5,000 years old. To put that in perspective, while the Great Pyramid of Giza was being commissioned in Egypt, the people of Caral were already building a massive, complex metropolis in the middle of a desert plateau. But here's the thing that will blow your mind. They did it without the essentials. In almost every other ancient culture, grain was the foundation. Wheat in Mesopotamia, corn in Mesoamerica. Grain can be stored, taxed, and controlled by kings. But the people of Caral? They didn't grow grain. They didn't even have ceramics. Imagine a city of 3,000 people with massive stone pyramids and not a single clay pot to cook in. So how did they become so powerful? The answer lies in a strange trade-off. They lived near the coast, so they had an endless supply of fish, anchovies, and sardines. But you can't build a pyramid with just fish. You need tools. You need ropes to move massive stones. This is where the Supe Valley genius comes in. They grew cotton, lots of it. They traded their cotton nets to the coastal fishermen in exchange for food. It was a perfect, peaceful loop of commerce. And because their wealth was based on cotton and fish, not storable grain, there was no way for a tyrant to hoard the food and enslave the people. When you look at the ruins of Caral today, you see 6 massive pyramids surrounding a giant public plaza. You see an amphitheater designed for music. In fact, archaeologists found 32 flutes made of condor and pelican bones, and 37 cornets made of deer and llama bones. Think about that image for a second. While other early civilizations were sharpening bronze swords and building walls to keep out invaders, the people of Caral were gathering in their stone plazas to listen to orchestral music. After decades of excavation, archaeologists have not found a single weapon. Not one. No decapitated skeletons, no burned-out fortifications, no signs of war for over 1,000 years. It was a 1,000-year experiment in peace. But then, around 1800 BCE, the music stopped. The pyramids were abandoned. Why? The latest research suggests that the very earth they stood on betrayed them. A series of massive earthquakes rocked the valley, followed by extreme weather from El Niño. The tremors shook the hills, causing massive landslides that choked their irrigation systems and buried their fertile lands in sand. The people of Caral didn't leave because of a conqueror. They left because the environment they had mastered for 10 centuries became uninhabitable. They walked away, leaving behind their flutes and their monuments, disappearing into the mist of the Andes. They left us with a haunting question. If a civilization can survive for 1,000 years without a single war, why can't we? Now, let's go back even further. Before the pyramids, before the first cities, there was a group of people who conquered a continent while it was still locked in the grip of the Ice Age. These were the Clovis people, the elite hunters of the ancient Americas. For a long time, we thought they were the very first humans to set foot in the New World. While that debate is still raging among scientists, one thing is certain. Around 13,000 years ago, the Clovis culture was the high-tech superpower of the North American continent. But their technology wasn't built of stone walls or irrigation canals. It was built of flint, specifically the Clovis point. If you've never seen one, it's a masterpiece of engineering. It's a spearhead so sharp, so balanced, and so thin that it could pierce the thick hide of a woolly mammoth or a giant ground sloth. These weren't just tools. They were the ballistic missiles of the Stone Age. Imagine being a Clovis hunter. You are living in a world of giants. You're tracking beasts twice the size of a modern elephant, across a landscape of glaciers and endless tundras. You are part of a highly mobile, incredibly brave society that spread across North America with lightning speed. From the coast of California to the forests of Florida, the Clovis Point is found everywhere, marking the trail of a people who feared nothing. They were the masters of their world. And then, in what feels like a heartbeat in geological time, barely 200 to 400 years, they vanished. Around 12,800 years ago, the Clovis points stopped being made. The mammoth kill sites went cold. It's as if an entire culture just evaporated. So, what happened? For years, the leading theory was that they were victims of their own success. They were such efficient hunters that they wiped out their primary food source, the megafauna. No more mammoths meant no more Clovis. But then, science found something much more terrifying. Right at the moment the Clovis vanished, the Earth's climate took a violent, sudden U-turn. This period is known as the Younger Dryas. In a matter of decades, the world, which had been warming up, suddenly plummeted back into deep freeze temperatures. Some researchers believe this wasn't just a natural satchel cycle. They found a layer of black matte Earth across North America, filled with nanodiamonds and iridium, materials often associated with cosmic impacts. The theory? A comet may have exploded over the ice sheets, triggering massive wildfires, floods, and a nuclear winter that lasted 1,000 years. Whether it was a comet from the sky or a collapse of the ecosystem, the Clovis people faced an apocalypse. They didn't have cities to hide in. Their entire identity was tied to the Great Hunt. When the giants died, the Clovis culture died with them. They left behind no temples, no gold, and no writing. Just these beautiful lethal stone points, buried in the dirt, waiting for us to find them and wonder. If the masters of the Ice Age could vanish in a flash, how safe are we in our own warm and comfortable world? Long before the philosophers of Athens or the legions of Sparta, there was a paradise in the middle of the Mediterranean. On the island of Crete, a civilization flourished that felt more like a modern dream than an ancient reality. This was the Minoan civilization, Europe's first great sophisticated society. Walking through their capital, Knossos, 4,000 years ago, would have been a sensory overload. You'd see massive, multi-story palaces painted in vibrant reds and blues. You'd see indoor plumbing, complex light wells to let in the sun, and walls covered in breathtaking frescoes. But what's most striking about the Minoans isn't just their architecture, it's their vibe. Unlike the warlike empires of the Bronze Age, Minoan art doesn't celebrate kings crushing their enemies. Instead, it celebrates life. You see dolphins jumping in the waves, elegant women with elaborate hairstyles and jewelry, and young men performing the death-defying sport of bull leaping, literally somersaulting over the horns of a charging bull. They were the masters of the sea. They didn't even build city walls because their navy was so dominant, no one dared to touch them. They were wealthy, artistic, and seemingly untouchable. And then, the earth literally ripped itself apart. About 70 miles north of Crete sat the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini. Around 1600 BCE, the volcano at its heart erupted in one of the largest volcanic events in human history. To give you an idea of the scale, it was 4 or 5 times more powerful than the eruption of Krakatoa. Imagine the sky turning black as coal in the middle of the day. A pillar of ash shot 20 miles into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun for weeks. But for the Minoans on Crete, the worst was yet to come. The eruption triggered a massive collapse of the volcano's caldera, sending a wall of water, a mega tsunami, racing toward the Cretan coast. Scientists estimate these waves were up to 30 feet high. They slammed into the Minoan ports, shattering their legendary navy in a single afternoon. Their ships, the source of their wealth and their only defense, were turned into toothpicks. But here's the mystery. The Minoans didn't disappear immediately after the volcano. They survived for another century. But they were a shadow of their former selves. The ash had poisoned their crops, the tsunami had destroyed their trade, and their unbeatable gods had seemingly abandoned them. In their weakened state, a new power from mainland Greece, the Mycenaeans, saw an opportunity. They sailed into the broken ports of Crete and took over. The Minoan language disappeared, replaced by Greek. Their peaceful art was replaced by images of spears and shields. The Minoans didn't just die, they were overwritten. Their story faded into myth, inspiring the legend of King Minos, the Labyrinth, and the lost city of Atlantis. It's a chilling reminder that you can build a paradise, you can master the seas, but you can never truly negotiate with a volcano. If the Minoans were the artists of the ancient Mediterranean, their successors, the Mycenaeans, were the warriors. This is the world of the Iliad and the Odyssey. This is the era of Agamemnon, Achilles, and the legendary Trojan War. But for a long time, historians thought these were just fairy tales. That is, until we found the massive, brooding fortresses of Mycenae and Tiryns. Walking into a Mycenaean city was a very different experience from the open, airy palaces of Crete. These were citadels. They were built on high, jagged rocks, surrounded by walls so enormous that later Greeks believed only the one-eyed giants, the Cyclopes, could have moved the stones. We call it Cyclopean masonry. Some of these limestone blocks weigh over 20 tons. The Mycenaeans didn't just value art, they valued power, hierarchy, and gold. When archaeologists first opened the royal shaft graves at Mycenae, they found a literal treasure haul. Golden masks covering the faces of dead kings, bronze daggers inlaid with scenes of lion hunts, and suits of armor made of thick bronze plates. They were a society geared for expansion and combat. By 1300 BCE, the Mycenaeans were at the top of their game. They had taken over the Minoan trade routes. Their palaces were administrative hubs controlling every jar of olive oil and every flock of sheep, and their influence stretched from Italy to the shores of modern-day Turkey. They were the undisputed heavyweights of the Aegean, and then, in less than a single lifetime, it all burned. Around 1200 BCE, a catastrophe hit the entire eastern Mediterranean. It's known as the Late Bronze Age collapse. In Mycenae, Pylos, and Tiryns, we see the same terrifying archaeological layer, a thick band of ash and scorched earth. The great palaces were looted and set on fire. But who did it? For decades, historians blamed the Sea Peoples, mysterious raiders from the west. Others blamed an invasion of Dorians from the north. But modern research suggests the truth was much more complex. The Mycenaean system was a palace economy. Everything, food, weapons, taxes, flowed through the palace. It was a highly centralized, fragile, just-in-time supply chain. When a series of massive droughts hit the region, the crops failed. When the trade routes were disrupted by pirates, the economy collapsed. The people, starving and desperate, likely turned on their own kings. The very walls built to keep out invaders couldn't protect the elites from a hungry population. Within a few decades, the Mycenaean world didn't just decline, it vanished. The most shocking part? When the palaces fell, literacy fell with them. The Mycenaeans had a writing system called Linear B. When the scribes died in the fires, the knowledge of writing disappeared from Greece for 400 years. Greece entered a dark age. The legends of their greatness lived on only through oral poems, whispered from generation to generation, until they were finally written down by Homer centuries later. The Mycenaeans remind us that even the thickest walls and the brightest gold can't save a civilization if the system beneath it rots away. Deep in the heart of the Jordanian desert, there's a narrow, winding canyon called the Siq. For over a mile, you walk between towering walls of stone, and just when you think the path will never end, the rocks open up to reveal a sight that feels like a hallucination. The treasury of Petra. A massive, ornate temple facade carved directly into the rose-red sandstone cliffs. This was the crown jewel of the Nabataeans. But to understand how they built this, we have to forget the lost city myths and look at the science. The Nabataeans started as nomadic Bedouins, wandering the desert with their goats and camels. Yet they did something no one else could. They conquered the most brutal environment on Earth, not with swords, but with pipes. You see, Petra shouldn't exist. It's a desert that gets less than 6 inches of rain a year. But at its peak, Petra was a lush oasis with flowing fountains, a massive public swimming pool, and private gardens. How? The Nabataeans were the greatest hydraulic engineers of the ancient world. They carved miles of hidden channels into the canyon walls. They built hundreds of underground cisterns to catch every single drop of flash flood water. They understood water pressure and filtration 2,000 years before modern civil engineering. While their neighbors were dying of thirst, the Nabataeans were getting rich by selling water and protection to the massive trade caravans carrying frankincense and myrrh from Arabia to Rome. They were the Silicon Valley of the desert. They sat at the ultimate crossroads of the world. They were so wealthy that they didn't just build houses, they sculpted their city into the mountain itself, blending Greek, Roman, and Egyptian styles into something completely unique. But then, the world changed. In 116 AD, the Roman Empire officially absorbed the Nabataean kingdom. For a while, Petra continued to thrive as a Roman province. But the Nabataeans' real power wasn't their walls, it was their location. Slowly, the Roman Empire began to shift its trade routes. Instead of long, dangerous camel treks across the burning sands, merchants started using ships to cross the Red Sea. One by one, the caravans stopped coming to Petra. The rose-red city started losing its purpose. Then, in 363 AD, a massive earthquake shattered the city's complex water system and toppled many of its structures. The Nabataeans didn't go extinct in a day. They didn't die in a great battle. Instead, they simply drifted away. As the water stopped flowing and the money stopped coming, the people moved to the coast or joined other Arab tribes. By the time the Middle Ages arrived, this once bustling metropolis of 30,000 people was forgotten by the Western world. known only to the local Bedouins, who kept its location a secret for 1,000 years. The Nabataeans leave us with a powerful insight. Wealth isn't about what you build, it's about where the world's energy is flowing. You can carve your legacy into the very bones of the earth, but if the trade routes of the world move on, the desert will eventually take it all back. Now, we're heading to the roof of the world. Imagine a city sitting 13,000 feet above sea level in the thin, cold air of the Bolivian Andes. This is Tiwanaku. Long before the Incas claimed to be the children of the sun, Tiwanaku was the spiritual and political heartbeat of South America for nearly 500 years. When you first see the ruins of Tiwanaku, you realize you're looking at a mystery written in stone. We're talking about massive blocks of andesite and sandstone, some weighing over 130 tons. But it's not just the size, it's the precision. These stones are cut with such razor-sharp accuracy that they look like they were machined by modern lasers. They used internal bronze clamps to lock these giant blocks together, a technology that was thousands of years ahead of its time in the Americas. The most famous structure here is the Gate of the Sun. It's carved from a single, massive block of stone, decorated with a mysterious staff god and strange calendar-like symbols. For centuries, people looked at these ruins and thought, humans couldn't have built this. It must have been giants or gods. But the real genius of Tiwanaku wasn't just in their masonry, it was in their dirt. At this altitude, the air is freezing and the soil is poor. You shouldn't be able to feed a city of 30,000 people here. But the Tiwanaku people invented a revolutionary farming system called suka kolu, or raised fields. They built long, elevated platforms of earth surrounded by canals of water. During the day, the water soaked up the intense Andean sunlight. At night, when the temperature plummeted below freezing, the water released that heat like a natural radiator, creating a layer of warm air that protected the crops from frost. It was a masterpiece of sustainable engineering. In fact, modern experiments show that these ancient fields actually outperform modern chemical farming in this region. So how does a civilization that literally hacked the climate and mastered the mountains just vanish? Around 1000 AD, the sky turned against them. A massive catastrophic drought hit the Andes, lasting for decades, some say over a century. The water in the canals evaporated, the heat sink system failed, the crops withered under the freezing night air. As the food disappeared, so did the people's faith in the elites. The religious leaders who claimed they could communicate with the gods of rain were suddenly powerless. We see evidence of a violent internal collapse. Statues were smashed, and the city was abandoned almost overnight. The Tiwanaku didn't leave because they were conquered by an army. They were conquered by a change in the weather. They left behind a silent city of stone that still challenges our understanding of what primitive people were capable of. It's a chilling reminder. You can build a city out of the hardest rock on earth, but you are still made of water and breath. And if the rain stops, the stones can't save you. When we think of ancient pyramids, our minds usually fly to Egypt or Mexico. But what if I told you that 800 years ago, one of the largest pyramids on Earth was right in the middle of the American Midwest? Welcome to Cahokia. Located just across the river from modern-day St. Louis, Missouri, Cahokia wasn't just a village. By the year 1100 AD, it was a sprawling, sophisticated metropolis. At its peak, it had a population of 20,000 people. To put that in perspective, Cahokia was larger than London was at the exact same time. It was the largest city in North America north of Mexico, and it wouldn't be surpassed by an American city until after the American Revolution. But here's the catch. The people of Cahokia didn't build with stone. They built with earth. They moved an estimated 55 million cubic feet of soil, all carried in hand-woven baskets, to create over 120 massive mounds. The largest, known as Monk's Mound, rises 100 feet into the air and covers more ground at its base than the Great Pyramid of Giza. On top of these mounds, the elites lived in wooden palaces, looking down over a vast central plaza where thousands gathered for games, rituals, and trade. They were a people of the stars, too. Archaeologists discovered a massive circle of cedar posts dubbed Woodhenge. It functioned as a precise solar calendar, tracking the solstices and equinoxes with incredible accuracy. This was a high-functioning, deeply religious, and tightly organized society. And then, by the 1300s, the city went silent. By the time the first European explorers arrived in the 16th century, Cahokia was just a series of grass-covered hills. The local indigenous tribes didn't even have stories of who built it. A city of 20,000 people had simply vanished from the map. So, what happened to the Manhattan of the Mississippi? The mystery of Cahokia's collapse is a detective story of too much too fast. To build a city that big, they had to clear-cut the surrounding forests for fuel and construction. Without trees to hold the soil, massive floods began to sweep through the valley, destroying their crops. Modern science has found evidence of a mega-flood around 1200 AD that likely broke the city's spirit. But it wasn't just nature. Excavations at Mound 72 revealed something darker: mass graves and evidence of human sacrifice. It suggests that as resources dwindled, the social contract began to fracture. The people likely grew tired of the demands of their sun kings. They didn't die in a single plague, they simply voted with their feet. Families started leaving in small groups, abandoning the wooden palaces and the giant mounds to the wind and the rain. Cahokia is a haunting reminder that a civilization's greatest strength, its size and complexity, can also be its greatest weakness. They built a world out of the very earth they stood on, and when they pushed that earth too far, it swallowed their history whole. Across the vast blue emptiness of the Western Pacific, on the remote island of Pohnpei, lies a city that shouldn't exist. It's called Madol. This isn't just a ruin. It's a sprawling complex of nearly 100 artificial islands, built directly on top of a coral reef. Imagine moving 750,000 tons of heavy basalt rock, some stones weighing over 50 tons, without wheels, without pulleys, and without metal tools. Yet, the people of the Saudolar dynasty did exactly that, starting 1,000 years ago. They created a stone Venice in the middle of the ocean, a city of canals, high walls, and royal mortuaries that seems to float on the water. But here's the mystery. The basalt logs used to build Madol aren't from this side of the island. They had to be transported from miles away. Local legends say the stones didn't move by boat. They say two powerful sorcerers used magic to make the giant rocks fly through the air and settle into place. While modern archaeologists struggle to explain the logistics, the local people have always known it as the City of Ghosts. Madol was the seat of the Saudolar kings. It was a masterpiece of social control. By forcing the local chiefs to live in the city, the kings could keep a close eye on their rivals. It was a place of high ritual, but also high tension. The city was built for the elite, but it had one fatal flaw. It had no fresh water and no way to grow food. Everything, every drop of water, every bite of taro, had to be brought in by boat from the main island. Madol was a city completely dependent on the labor and loyalty of the people on the mainland. And that loyalty had a breaking point. The Saudolar kings became increasingly tyrannical. Legend tells of one king so cruel that he demanded the people bring him a tribute of every single fish caught in the sea. By the 1600s, the social system snapped. A legendary warrior named Caral-Supe invaded the city with a small army. Because the city was so isolated and hated by its own subjects, the Saudolar regime collapsed almost instantly. But here's the strange part. After Caral-Supe took over, he and his people didn't stay. They realized that living in a city of stone with no water was a nightmare. They abandoned the massive basalt palaces and moved back to the main island. Madol was left to the tides. For centuries, the Pacific Ocean has been trying to reclaim it. Mangroves are strangling the stone walls, and the canals are filling with silt. It remains a haunting skeleton of an empire that forgot its people. It stands as a warning. No matter how much magic or stone you possess, a civilization cannot survive if it loses its connection to the very earth and water that sustain it. For our final mystery, we travel to the high deserts of the American Southwest, to the Four Corners region, where Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado meet. Here, tucked into the massive, hollowed-out alcoves of sheer sandstone cliffs, sit some of the most haunting ruins on the planet. This is the world of the ancestral Puebloans, formerly known as the Anasazi. Imagine building an apartment complex for hundreds of people, not on flat ground, but hundreds of feet up a vertical cliff face. Around 1100 AD, these people reached a level of architectural genius that still defies belief. At sites like Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon, they built multi-story stone cities with hundreds of rooms, complex T-shaped doorways, and deep circular underground chambers called kivas for their sacred rituals. They were masters of the stars. In Chaco Canyon, their buildings are aligned with such celestial precision that they track the 18.6-year lunar cycle. They weren't just farmers. They were astronomers and engineers living in a vertical world. But then, around 1250 AD, something changed, and it changed fast. After centuries of building these magnificent cliff dwellings, the Anasazi didn't just decline, they bolted. And when I say bolted, I mean it. Archaeologists have found rooms where precious pottery was left behind, tools were laid out as if for a morning's work, and grain was still stored in the jars. It looks like a city where the people just walked out the door and never came back. For a long time, the Great Drought was the primary suspect. Tree ring data shows a brutal 30-year dry spell that would have turned their cornfields to dust. But recently, we found a darker layer to the story. In the final years before they left, the Anasazi moved their homes from the canyon floors to the most inaccessible, defensible parts of the cliffs. They built walls. They blocked off paths. We found evidence of increased violence and even signs of desperate warfare. It wasn't just that the rain stopped. It was that when the resources vanished, the social peace vanished with them. Fear became the neighbor they lived with every day. By 1300 AD, the great cliff cities were silent. The Anasazi didn't vanish into thin air, though. They migrated south, eventually becoming the modern Hopi and Zuni peoples of today. But the civilization, the era of the great cliff palaces, was gone forever. They left us with a powerful, lingering image, a stone city, perched precariously between the earth and the sky, abandoned in a rush. It's a reminder that even the most beautiful and spiritually connected societies can be broken by the twin hammers of environmental collapse and social conflict. As we look back at all 10 of these vanished worlds, the message is clear. A civilization is not a permanent building. It is a delicate balance. And once that balance is tipped, the desert, the jungle, or the ocean is always waiting to take it back. These 10 civilizations didn't just fail, they left us a map of our own fragility. They remind us that the unbreakable systems we build today, our cities, our technology, our economy, are all guests of the environment. History isn't a straight line of progress, it's a cycle of balance. So as we look at these ruins, the question isn't how they vanished, but how we can listen to their silence before our own story becomes a riddle for the future. What will remain of us? That's up to you. Thanks for watching.